Hi students, for this micro lecture I really wanted to focus in and explain the neuron to you guys. I know by this point hopefully you've read about it in the chapter, maybe have gone through the PowerPoint presentation, but I really want to pull this out and just really take some time to help you understand the neurological structure of the neuron. And so you can see actually here in this picture you have two neurons. So this is the first one right here, and then this would be the receiving neuron over here. So you have billions of neurons in your central nervous system, which is comprised of your brain and your spinal cord. And this is how we send information from our brain out to the rest of our body, and also how our body, through our sensory systems, picks up information and brings it back up into our brain. So that's why you have receiving and sending neurons, and they're just connected. If we were in class together, I would have you, if we were in class together in person, and it was also pre-pandemic, I can talk. I'm filming this on Friday afternoon and I'm all talked out, sorry. I would have you play the telephone game. Do you remember playing that as a child? So I would whisper something to the first student, and then the rules are you can't repeat anything, and then that student would whisper it to the next student, and so forth, and so on, until it made it all the way around to the room. And then that poor student that was the last one to get the message would have to say it out loud. And it's always so off course of what I started with saying, right? And it is because we have transmitted information from one person to the other. And so much of that information has been lost. We didn't hear it, but the rule is you can't repeat it, right? And so, you know, in the telephone game, in that example there, the information is not delivered perfectly. But your neurons are like that, one after another, but they're delivering the message. Now, there are certain circumstances where some information escapes, and we'll talk about that. But more or less, right, at this faster than the speed of light, information is passed through. So if this is actually my phone, but let's pretend like this is the burner on my stove. If I came up and I didn't know it was on and I touched it, I don't have to wait. Think about if that message were to go from person to person like in the telephone game, right? My hand would be on fire by that point, right? But because of neurons, I can touch it and I can pull off right away, because that's how fast my nerve endings are going to pick up the heat, send the message to the brain. That's hot, we shouldn't be touching it. My brain's going to send the message back to my muscle. Pull your hand away, that's hot. You don't want to touch it and get burned. And all of that is because of our neurons. So that's just one example of how this neural structure helps us to send and receive information. So if we're looking at our neuron here, so let's look at this, what I will be calling the sending neuron, since this one is receiving. The first thing that you'll notice here, right, is the cell body. And so, you know, as any typical cell has, you have that structure. And information is going to come into the cell body from the dendrites. So the dendrites are these finger-like structures out there that receive and pull in the information. So the information comes in through the dendrites, it travels into the cell body, and this is where it is, all the information that comes in from the dendrites is collected, and then it is sent down to the axon. So this entire long surface here is known as the axon. And the axon is where information is transmitted down. Now, around the axon is what's known as the myelin sheath. And the myelin sheath is a protective insulated covering. So think about like an extension cord, right? If I had an extension cord and it didn't have that plastic wrapped around it, information, electricity, and in the case it would be electricity, right, would be escaping. And so you wouldn't get the full charge. If you had it, whatever you had it plugged into, it probably wouldn't be working. But that myelin sheath keeps all of the information that came into the dendrites that's being passed down along the axon, it keeps it concise. It keeps it moving fast. It acts as an insulator as well as speeds up the neural impulse and keeps it collected so you don't have information escaping out of your axon. So it travels down very, very, very quickly. And it comes down here, and it's not labeled on this particular slide, but it comes down, and comes down to your terminal feet or buttons. Depending upon who the author of is the book, sometimes you'll see terminal feet, sometimes terminal buttons. It's the same thing. It's these nodule-like structures at the end of your neuron, and that is where all the information is collected. And then it will pass from one neuron to the next. So this is the start of our receiving neuron. So they all look the same. They all have the same structures, but now this neuron, the dendrites, pick up from the terminal feet or buttons the information, and then the same thing happens over. So that is how you have the same message being sent all throughout your central nervous system, because one neuron at a time sends that information. But of course for us, and thank goodness, it's quick, it's fast. So I hope this micro lecture has helped you capture what's going on with the neurons a little bit better, has focused in on some of the parts of the neuron, and then explained the connection between multiple neurons. Thank you.